Hello everyone and welcome to week 6 of our Arabella Crochet Along. This week we are going to be joining our motifs. So I broke out my original sample here so that I could show you what it's going to look like when we're done. For our join, we're going to be using the method known as the zipper join. And you can see I've used yellow here so that you can really see it clearly. This join gives us beautiful straight lines that are really crisp and show off our motifs. This join I love because it's not just a method of hooking your squares together, it's actually a design element. It adds something to our blanket, and especially when we use a different color like this, it adds a new design element and really adds to the overall look of the Afghan. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to do the zipper join. I originally learned this join from lookatwhatimade.net. Check the PDF. There is a link to the original photo tutorial. It is great. It's really handy. I recommend bookmarking it because this join is one that you'll probably want to use again in the future. I have, for this Afghan, made a couple little changes, and I have a couple big things I'd like to show you in how we're going to join these overall. Because our Afghan is turned 45 degrees, all of our motifs are at an angle, we can actually do some different things with this join. So I'm going to show you some strategies for how you can apply the join. For my motifs, for these ones here, I am going to be joining with Batik Elements, and this color is magnesium. It's a variegated yarn, so we should be getting an interesting effect. We will see. So grab your motifs, get them all ready, and we are going to be using a 5mm crochet hook, or just use one size up from whatever you used to make your motifs. So the first thing we're going to do is lay out our motifs so we can see exactly what we're doing when we join. If you have different color motifs, the way I do here, you're also going to want to take some time to decide on how you want them laid out. If they're all the same color, you still want to lay them all out because it will help when you are joining. It can get a little bit confusing which motifs you're joining to which, and when they're all laid out nicely, it makes it a lot easier. So I have selected just a few motifs that I can show you in a smaller sample that will actually fit in my camera screen. So I'm just going to lay them out, and when I do my whole Afghan, I'll lay out, I have 12 motif A's, I'll lay them all out and I'll decide exactly how I like the colors to look. But for right now, since I'm only doing 4, I don't have a lot of decisions to make. Actually, if I was going to do this, I'd probably switch these because these two are lighter and these two are darker. Yeah, that looks much better. So let's just lay out all of our motifs, make sure everything is face up. Okay, once everything is laid out, leave it there and we will get started on our join. So the first thing that we need to do is decide on a strategy for how we're going to join. You can actually do this join 3 different ways. And if you look at the PDF, I have actually given you 4 different ways. The last 2 are almost the same exact thing, but I've had to make I've had to compensate for those of us who are making square patterns. That one has to be a little bit different, but these last 2 are almost essentially the same thing. So before we pick up our hook and yarn, we want to know how we are going to join our motifs. So let's go over these real fast. And I'm sorry I'm not very high tech. I do not know anything about animation. So we're going to do this old school. And I'm just going to pretend these are my motifs here. And first we're going to go over zipper join A in strips. This is the easiest way to manage all of the pieces without getting confused about which piece is next. The problem with this method is that there are a ton of ends to weave in. So I'm just going to use markers to show you how you would do this. So what you'll do is you'll join all in one direction but in strips. So you'll take 2 motifs at a time, right here, C and A, and you'll join those 2. So you'll start and you'll fasten off and just do that section of join. Then you'll come over here and do this section right here of C and A. And then you'll do the next strip, C and A, and then A and B and A and C. And then the next strip is D and A and B and A and B and A and C. So just like that until you have all of these strips made. Okay, so then you'll have all the strips plus these 2 motif Ds on the end. So then you'll take your strips and you'll go back and you'll join the opposite way, like this. But this time you can just go all the way across. And that is how you do the strips method. Again, the only problem with this method is that you will have lots and lots of ends to weave in. The next way that you can use this join, oh, and this one is upside down, that's gonna drive me crazy. Okay, the next way that you can use this join is by doing all of the joins in one direction and then in the other. I call this the crisscross. This is zipper join B, the crisscross. So what you would do here is all of your joins in one direction, like this. You would just go straight across. So you do C and A, and then what you'll do in this intersection is chain 1, and you'll do A and B, and then you'll chain 1 and do C and A. And then you'll come down here and do C and A, chain 1, A and B, chain 1, B and A, chain 1, A and B, chain 1, C and A. And you'll do that all the way across until you have this big sort of net. It can get a little weird, it can get a little twisted, it's a little bit difficult to manage, but it's not too bad. This is how I have always done it. And then you'll come back and you'll go the other way, and you'll just do D and A real easily. Then you do C and A, chain 1, goes right over the chain 1 from the opposite direction. A and B, chain 1, right over the chain 1 from the opposite direction, C and A. And then fasten off at the end. And then you'll do that across this way too, all the way. Until all of your motifs are joined. So that's the crisscross method. Now the last method we are going to look at is a continuous join. And this is really cool. I just figured this out for this Afghan, but because our motifs are pointed, they're on end, we can do the join in one long piece. So I'm going to show you how to do that. If you are using a rectangular layout, so this is 1, 2, 3 motif A's across this way, and 1, 2, 3, 4 this way, so it's a rectangle. It will not work on a square. A square is a little different, and I'll show you that next. It works, just not quite the same. So this is a 3 by 3. We can't do it on a square, but we can do it on this rectangle. So what you'll do is you can pick pretty much any place to start on the outside. I would probably just start up here by a motif D because it makes the most sense to me. So what you'll do is start here and join motif A and C, chain 1 and then do B and A, chain 1, do A and B, chain 1, B and A, just keep going all the way till you get to the corner. Now, or to the side. Now, don't fasten off here. Instead, chain 1, or if your chains are very tight, chain 2. That might work better for you. I will leave that up to you depending on your own personal tension. So get to the end, chain 1 or 2, turn and go down this way and join C and A. And then A and B and C and A. And when you get to this side, chain 1 or 2 and go this way with your join. Okay, now let's keep going. Chain 1 or 2 and turn another 90 degrees and go up here, here, and just keep going. It's kind of like a maze. Now this is going to get more and more complicated depending on how many motifs you have. So if you're making a really big afghan, you might not want to do this. But look, here we are, back to the start, and all of our motifs are joined in one long piece, which means we only have 2 ends to weave in. That's it. So this is going to be the most complicated option because of how the join goes. That's going to be a lot to manage doing your pieces. It is possible. It has been tested. It works. Just before you jump in, make sure that you have your motifs laid out. That will really help. Lay them all out, and after each section you've joined, I recommend laying the joined pieces over them, making sure everything is in order, and just going piece by piece by piece and checking after every 2 pieces are joined. So that's how you do it if you have a rectangle. If you have a square, you can't do 1 piece, but you can still make this easier. It's going to take a couple pieces, but it's still better than doing the strips or even doing the crisscross. So if you have a square, what you'll do is, let's start in the exact same spot up here. We'll go this way and turn and turn and back at the start. So there's 1 loop. Then we will come here and we'll do another loop. Essentially, this is just loops on loops. Depending on how big your square is, you will have more or less loops. There's 2 and 1 more joins all of the pieces. So in this scenario, we joined all of these pieces with just 3 pieces of yarn. So it's almost continuous. Still a lot less ends than the strips or the crisscross, but still maybe a lot to manage. So I will let you decide if you want to do those or not. I think the most manageable version is the crisscross. I've done that one quite a few times, and I think that's probably a nice, easy medium. I, however, am going to go crazy and do this continuous join because I think it's really cool, and I love the idea of not having to weave in all those ends. So there you go. Those are our strategies for joining these layouts. Now what we need to do is learn how to make the actual join stitches. All right, now let's make some stitches. So grab your hook and your yarn and your first 2 motifs. We are going to start, I'm just going to start with a motif A and a motif C because I'd like to show you how the stitch matches up to the chain space and how the 2 chain spaces match up together, so you know how to work both of those scenarios. So we'll take our first 2 motifs and lay them next to each other face up. Essentially what we're going to do is just make a slip stitch join, but unlike other slip stitch joins, this one is going to be made into the back loops only of both motifs, and it's going to be worked from the front on both motifs. So normally when you do a slip stitch join, you will sandwich your motifs together and work through them like that, all from one side. In this join, both motifs are going to be facing up. So let's get started. We'll take our yarn and hook, put a slip knot on our hook, and that's something I do a little differently. I like to start with the slip knot on my hook. It doesn't really matter if you put it on after you insert your hook into the first stitches or not. I just like to do it because I think it gives us a place to place a stitch when we add our border. So that's why I put the slip knot on first. Okay, so we're going to work into the very first stitches on each side. Now with motif C, it's pretty obvious that the first single crochet is the first stitch on this side. It can be a little bit hard to find that first stitch because of weaving in your ends. Sometimes it gets pulled in a little, so just tug on that corner, straighten things out, and make sure you can see the first stitch. Now over here on motif A, the first stitch of the side is usually that first single crochet, but for the purposes of this join, we are going to use the chain that is immediately before the first single crochet. That chain is going to be our first stitch and the stitch that we join to the first stitch of the motif C. So with the slip knot on your hook, insert your hook into the back loop only of the chain on motif A. So not under the whole chain space like we're used to working, not under the whole chain space, just under the back loop of that chain space. Insert your hook and then come over to motif C, and the first stitch is always really weird to work, so just hang in there. So come over to motif C, find that very first single crochet, and insert your hook under the back loop only. My yarn is splitting just a little. The first one can be so hard to get. Okay. Nope, that's it. I had it. Okay, I had it. Okay, so you've got your yarn or your hook inserted from front to back under both back loop only, the back loop only of both stitches. So now you can yarn over and pull up that loop, and you might find your tension gets a little bit loose here, so just pull on your working yarn until things even out, and then you can complete your slip stitch. Okay, that's the first one. I swear it gets easier after the first one. So now we're going to do the same thing with the next two stitches. It's a little easier now because the next stitch on motif A is a single crochet. So insert your hook into the back loop only of the next single crochet on motif A, and then into the back loop only of the next single crochet on motif C. Pull up a loop and complete your slip stitch. Now you can play with your tension here. If it gets a little loose, you can pull on it. If it gets a little tight, it's harder. You might need to go up another hook size if you have a problem with your slip stitches being too tight. Mine, I find, are all over the place. Sometimes they're tight and sometimes they're loose. So I try to keep them on the loose side, and then I just adjust my tension a little bit with each stitch as I go. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Once you find your rhythm, it's really quite easy. So we'll just keep doing that all the way across. First we go under the back loop only of the next stitch of motif A, and then the back loop only of the next stitch of motif C, and then slip stitch. And we'll keep doing that. Okay, so I'm putting the last slip stitch into the two single crochets, and all I have left are the chain spaces. So now what I'm going to do is in the back loop only of the first chain after the last single crochet on motif D, and into the back loop only of the first chain after the last single crochet of motif C, I'll work my last slip stitch, and that is enough for those two motifs to be joined. The other chain on the other side, or will be worked on the other side when we do the join going in the opposite direction. So we just work the first chain after the last stitches when we have 2 chain spaces together. So that is how the basic idea of the join works. If you are doing the strips method, you would fasten off at this point, but I have a feeling not very many people are going to try that one because I didn't really sell it, did I? Anyway, if you're going to do one of the other methods, which I really do recommend, they are manageable. At this point, what you would do is chain 1 and then start on your next 2 motifs. So I'll chain 1, and that just gives us a place for our joins to cross. It gives them a little bit of room, a little space to breathe. The next 2 motifs I've got lined up here. I am going to start with the chain space. The chain that comes immediately before the first single crochets on each of my motifs is the one I'm going to join. So into the back loop only of the chain, and again the first stitch of the new motifs is always the hardest, so go ahead and make it loose and then adjust your tension. I find is the easiest way to do that. And once you've got the first one in there, then you can just keep going with your join. So now I want to show you what to do when you come to an intersection, when you're working your join in the opposite direction and you get to an intersection of motifs. So I'll just put in my last couple stitches. And chain 1, and that chain 1 will just go right on top of the other chain 1, and you can move right on to the next 2 motifs. Really simple. Now if you're doing the strips method, it will be a little bit different. You don't have that chain 1 to work over, so you can either completely ignore that join, don't put a chain 1 in at all and just move right on to the next set of stitches, or you can try and make a slip stitch that connects the 2. I've never actually done the strips method myself, so I haven't been able to try that, but either way should work just fine. If you want to make sure that they're connected, put a slip stitch that connects the 2 joins just the same way. Go from front to back on the very last slip stitch on each side of your joins. Put a slip stitch right in there and then move on to your next stitches, or just skip it entirely. It works just fine if you do not put a chain in there. I just like the chain to give it a little bit of breathing room so that the corners aren't pulled too tight. It's a really minor difference, but that's the way that I do it. So that is how you do an intersection. Okay, so I think that is everything that you need to know for the zipper join method for the Arabella Afghan. If you have any questions, by all means, send them to me on Facebook and I will do everything I can to help. I think that you'll really enjoy this method, and I hope this video was helpful and that you love the way your motifs look when they are finally all joined together and make one big, beautiful piece. I can't wait to see what you make. Have fun.